Marcus Thompson pushed his cleaning cart down the gleaming hallway of Elite Fitness Academy, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor. At 52 years old, he had been working as a janitor at this upscale martial arts gym for nearly 3 years. His dark skin glistened with sweat from the physical demands of his job, but his movements were surprisingly graceful for a man his age. Most people who passed him in the hallways barely acknowledged his presence, treating him like part of the furniture. The gym catered to wealthy clients who paid premium rates for top-tier martial arts instruction. Located in an affluent suburb, Elite Fitness Academy boasted state-of-the-art equipment, luxurious locker rooms, and some of the most skilled instructors in the region. The walls were lined with trophies, championship belts, and photographs of successful students competing at national levels. Marcus had seen hundreds of students come and go during his time there. He quietly observed their training sessions while mopping floors and emptying trash bins. Some were dedicated athletes with genuine respect for the martial arts, while others seemed more interested in showing off their expensive gear and bragging about their belt rankings. He kept his thoughts to himself and focused on his work, knowing that his job was essential for supporting his elderly mother and putting his daughter through college. On this particular Tuesday evening, the gym was buzzing with activity. Advanced classes were in session, and the sound of sparring filled the air. Marcus methodically cleaned the viewing area where parents and friends often gathered to watch training sessions. The familiar sounds of martial arts training had become background noise to him over the years. Tyler Harrison was leading one of the advanced classes on the main mat. At 28 years old, Tyler was considered one of the rising stars of the academy. He had earned his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at a remarkably young age and had recently added a black belt in Muay Thai to his collection. His athletic build, combined with his technical skills and aggressive fighting style, made him a formidable opponent in local competitions. Tyler came from a wealthy family that owned several successful businesses in the area. His father had been a college wrestling champion, and Tyler had grown up with every advantage money could buy. Private coaching, the best equipment, and opportunities to train with world-class fighters had shaped him into an exceptional martial artist. However, success had also inflated his ego considerably. During training sessions, Tyler often made comments about people who he felt were beneath his social status. He had been known to make dismissive remarks about service workers, suggesting they lacked the discipline and intelligence required for martial arts. His attitude created tension among some of the more humble students, but his skills were undeniable, and the gym's management tolerated his behavior because he brought prestige to their program. As Marcus continued cleaning, he noticed Tyler's class was particularly intense that evening. The students were practicing advanced grappling techniques, and Tyler was demonstrating submissions with his usual confidence. Several newer students watched in awe as he effortlessly controlled his training partners, transitioning smoothly between different holds and positions. After the formal class ended, Tyler and several of his training partners continued practicing on their own. They were discussing an upcoming tournament and debating different strategies for their matches. Marcus had finished cleaning the main area and was organizing equipment in a nearby storage room when he overheard their conversation. "The problem with most people is they don't understand what real martial arts training requires," Tyler was saying, his voice carrying clearly across the mat. "It takes intelligence, dedication, and natural athletic ability. Most people simply don't have what it takes to reach an advanced level." One of his training partners, Jake Morrison, nodded in agreement. Jake was a brown belt who looked up to Tyler and often echoed his opinions. "You're absolutely right, man. I mean, look around this place. We're surrounded by people who could never understand the complexity of what we do." Marcus continued his work silently, but their words stung. He had heard similar comments before, but tonight they seemed particularly pointed. Tyler's voice grew louder as he warmed to his topic. "Take that janitor, for example," Tyler said, gesturing vaguely in Marcus's direction without bothering to lower his voice. I bet he's never even seen real martial arts before working here. People like that think fighting is just about throwing wild punches and hoping for the best. They have no concept of technique, strategy, or mental discipline. Jake laughed, encouraging Tyler to continue. Can you imagine someone like that trying to learn martial arts? It would be like watching a fish try to climb a tree. Marcus felt his jaw tighten as he listened to their conversation. He had dealt with ignorance and prejudice throughout his life, but hearing it expressed so casually in a place where he spent most of his waking hours was particularly frustrating. He continued working, hoping they would move on to another topic. Instead, Tyler seemed energized by the discussion. You know what would be interesting? A demonstration of the difference between trained fighters and regular people. Someone like that janitor probably thinks he's tough because he does physical labor all day, but he wouldn't last 10 seconds against someone with real training. The group laughed at Tyler's comment, and Marcus felt his hands clench around the mop handle. He had endured countless similar remarks throughout his life, usually choosing to ignore them rather than create conflict. However, something about Tyler's arrogant tone and the casual way he dismissed an entire group of people sparked something deep inside Marcus. As Marcus continued working, more students began to gather around Tyler's group. Word had spread that Tyler was in one of his talkative moods, and several people enjoyed listening to his confident pronouncements about martial arts and fighting. Tyler clearly enjoyed having an audience, and began sharing stories about his competition victories and training experiences. The fundamental difference between trained fighters and untrained people, Tyler continued, is that we understand leverage, timing, and technique. Strength and size become irrelevant when you have proper training. I could probably submit someone twice my size without breaking a sweat, simply because I understand the science behind fighting. Marcus finished organizing the equipment and began mopping the area near where Tyler's group was gathered. He moved quietly, hoping to complete his work and leave without drawing attention to himself. However, Tyler noticed his presence and saw an opportunity to make his point more dramatically. Actually, you know what would be educational? Tyler said, his voice taking on a challenging tone. A little demonstration of what real martial arts training can accomplish. Hey, janitor. Marcus looked up, meeting Tyler's gaze for the first time that evening. Tyler's eyes held a mixture of amusement and condescension that Marcus had seen many times before. The group of students turned to look at Marcus, their expressions ranging from curiosity to embarrassment at Tyler's boldness. "What's your name?" Tyler asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly interested in the answer. "Marcus," came the quiet reply. "Marcus. Right. Tell me, Marcus, have you ever been in a real fight before? I mean, besides maybe some street scuffle or barroom brawl?" Marcus continued mopping, trying to avoid eye contact. "I just clean the gym, sir. I don't bother anyone." Tyler laughed, interpreting Marcus's response as confirmation of his assumptions. "See, that's exactly what I mean. Real fighting isn't about bothering people or getting into trouble. It's about discipline, technique, and years of dedicated training. It's an art form that most people simply cannot comprehend." Several students in the group began to look uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. They could sense that Tyler was building towards something, and his tone was becoming increasingly condescending. However, Tyler seemed oblivious to their discomfort. "You know what, Marcus? I'll tell you what. How about a little friendly demonstration? Nothing serious, just a chance to show you what real martial arts training looks like. Maybe you could learn something." Marcus stopped mopping and looked directly at Tyler. "I don't think that's a good idea, sir. I need to finish my work." "Come on, Marcus. It'll just take a few minutes. Think of it as education. I promise I won't hurt you. We'll keep it light and friendly. Just some basic grappling, maybe show you a few simple techniques." The group of students exchanged glances, and several of them began to speak up against the idea. Jake Morrison looked particularly uncomfortable and tried to redirect the conversation. Maybe we should just focus on our own training, Tyler. I'm sure Marcus has work to finish. But Tyler was committed to his course now, energized by what he saw as an opportunity to demonstrate his superiority. Nonsense, Jake. This could be valuable for everyone here. Sometimes the best way to understand the effectiveness of proper training is to see it demonstrated against someone who hasn't had those advantages. Marcus set down his mop and turned to face Tyler fully. Something in his posture had changed, becoming more upright and centered. His eyes held a calm intensity that Tyler didn't notice, but that made several other students take an unconscious step backward. "You really want to do this?" Marcus asked, his voice steady and quiet. "Absolutely," Tyler replied confidently. "Like I said, nothing serious. Just a friendly demonstration. Maybe 30 seconds of light sparring, just enough to show you some basic techniques. It'll be educational for everyone." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "All right then, if you insist." Tyler grinned widely, clearly pleased with himself. "Excellent. This is going to be great. Everyone gather around. This will be a perfect example of what years of dedicated training can accomplish." As the group formed a loose circle around the center of the mat, several students continued to express concerns about the appropriateness of the demonstration. However, Tyler waved off their objections, too excited about his opportunity to prove his point to consider backing down. Marcus walked toward the center of the mat with measured steps, his movements surprisingly fluid for a man who spent his days pushing cleaning equipment around the gym. Tyler bounded onto the mat with his characteristic enthusiasm, already beginning to explain different techniques to his audience. "Now, what you're about to see," Tyler said, addressing the gathered students while gesturing toward Marcus, "is the difference between someone who has dedicated their life to understanding the art of combat and someone who hasn't had that opportunity. Marcus here represents the average person who might think they know something about fighting but really has no idea what they're up against when facing a trained martial artist." Marcus stood quietly in the center of the mat, his hands relaxed at his sides. His breathing was calm and controlled, and there was something almost meditative about his stillness. Tyler continued his commentary, unaware of the subtle changes in Marcus's demeanor that were becoming apparent to some of the more observant students. "The key things to watch for," Tyler continued, "are the differences in footwork, positioning, and technical execution. Notice how I'll use proper leverage and timing to control the engagement from the very beginning." Tyler moved into his fighting stance, a textbook position that demonstrated his excellent training. His hands were positioned correctly, his weight distribution was perfect, and his movement was smooth and confident. Everything about his posture reflected years of high-quality instruction and countless hours of practice. Marcus remained motionless, watching Tyler with an expression of calm attention. He made no move to adopt a fighting stance or position himself defensively. To Tyler and most of the watching students, this appeared to confirm their assumptions about his lack of training. However, a few of the more experienced martial artists in the group began to notice something unusual about Marcus's stillness. "Ready when you are, Marcus," Tyler announced, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. "Remember, we're keeping this light and friendly. I'll go easy on you, don't worry." Marcus nodded once, his expression unchanged. "Whenever you're ready." Tyler smiled confidently and began to move forward, his approach controlled and methodical. Everything about his movement demonstrated his technical proficiency and his complete confidence in the outcome of their brief encounter. The watching students prepared to witness what they expected would be a quick and one-sided demonstration of Tyler's superior skills. What none of them realized was that Marcus Thompson had been watching and learning from every training session, every technique demonstration, and every sparring match that had taken place in that gym over the past 3 years. More importantly, None of them knew about the 25 years Marcus had spent in the military, including his time with Special Forces units where hand-to-hand combat training went far beyond what most civilian martial arts schools ever taught. As Tyler closed the distance between them, Marcus's eyes remained calm and focused. Years of real combat experience had taught him to read opponents in ways that sport martial arts never could. He could see Tyler's intentions in his movement patterns, recognize his attack angles before Tyler himself was fully committed to them, and identify the gaps in his defense that came from fighting only in controlled, rule-based environments. The moment of contact was approaching, and everyone in the gym was about to discover that assumptions based on appearances could be very dangerous indeed. The unexpected turn. Tyler moved forward with the confidence of someone who had never faced a truly unexpected challenge in a controlled environment. His technique was flawless as he attempted what should have been a simple takedown, expecting to demonstrate his superiority within seconds. However, as he reached for Marcus, something unprecedented happened. Marcus moved. It wasn't the clumsy, panicked movement Tyler expected from an untrained opponent. Instead, Marcus shifted with a fluidity that seemed to defy physics. In one seamless motion, he stepped aside, redirected Tyler's forward momentum, and somehow Tyler found himself lying flat on his back on the mat, staring up at the ceiling with no clear understanding of how he had gotten there. The entire sequence had taken less than 2 seconds. A stunned silence filled the gym. Tyler blinked several times, trying to process what had just occurred. The watching students stood frozen, their brains struggling to reconcile what they had witnessed with their expectations. Marcus stood quietly above Tyler, his expression unchanged, his breathing still calm and controlled. "What? How did—" Tyler stammered as he began to sit up, his face flushing with embarrassment and confusion. Marcus extended a hand to help Tyler to his feet. "You all right, son?" Tyler stared at the offered hand for a moment before reluctantly accepting it. As he stood, his mind raced to find an explanation for what had happened. Surely it had been a fluke, some kind of accident or lucky break that had allowed the janitor to catch him off guard. That was unexpected, Tyler managed, trying to maintain his composure in front of his audience. "You must have caught me off balance. Good timing." Marcus nodded politely. Sometimes these things happen. Several students began to murmur among themselves, but Tyler was determined to regain control of the situation. His ego couldn't accept that he had been outmaneuvered by someone he had dismissed so completely just moments before. "Let's try that again," Tyler announced, his voice carrying a slight edge. "I wasn't quite ready that time. A real demonstration requires both parties to be properly prepared." Marcus looked at Tyler with something that might have been sympathy. "Are you sure? Maybe we should call it even and let you get back to your training." The suggestion only irritated Tyler further. The implication that he needed to be protected from embarrassment was worse than the initial takedown itself. Several of his students were watching intently, and he could see doubt beginning to creep into their expressions. No, I insist. One more time, but let's make it a proper demonstration this time." Marcus shrugged slightly. "If that's what you want." This time, Tyler approached more cautiously. His previous confidence had been replaced by wariness, and he tried to analyze what might have gone wrong in their first exchange. He decided that Marcus must have gotten lucky with a basic hip toss or sweep, techniques that even untrained people might accidentally execute if the timing was right. Tyler feinted left, then moved right, attempting a more complex approach that would be harder to counter accidentally. He reached for Marcus with better positioning and more careful control of his own balance. Once again, Marcus moved with that same inexplicable fluidity. This time, the watching students could see more clearly what was happening, though they still couldn't quite believe it. Marcus didn't just avoid Tyler's attack, he seemed to anticipate it. He moved before Tyler was fully committed, positioning himself perfectly to intercept and redirect Tyler's energy. Instead of using brute force or obvious techniques, Marcus used Tyler's own momentum and intentions against him. Tyler found himself airborne briefly before hitting the mat again, this time more forcefully. The landing knocked the wind out of him, and he lay gasping for several seconds, while Marcus stood calmly nearby. Jake Morrison stepped forward, his face pale with shock. "Tyler, are you okay?" Tyler rolled to his side, struggling to catch his breath. When he finally managed to sit up, his expression had changed completely. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by confusion and a growing sense of alarm. "This doesn't make any sense," Tyler muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Marcus crouched down beside him. "You took a pretty good fall there. Maybe we should stop now." "No!" Tyler's response was sharp and immediate. "No, this isn't over. There's something. I need to understand what's happening here." He struggled to his feet, his movements less graceful than usual. Several students started to voice objections, suggesting that Tyler had proven his point and should let the matter drop. However, Tyler was beyond listening to reason. His worldview had been shaken, and he needed to restore his sense of reality. "One more time," Tyler insisted. "But let's make it more interesting. Real sparring, not just grappling. Let's see how you handle striking." Marcus stood and studied Tyler's face carefully. He could see the desperation building behind Tyler's eyes, the need to prove that his years of training and his social assumptions hadn't been completely wrong. Marcus had seen that look before, in young soldiers who had discovered that combat was nothing like their training had led them to believe. "Tyler," Marcus said quietly, "this isn't necessary. You're a skilled martial artist. You don't have anything to prove to anyone here." The kindness in Marcus's voice only made Tyler more frustrated. Being patronized by someone he had dismissed as beneath his notice was intolerable. He moved back to the center of the mat and adopted a striking stance, his hands up in a guard position. "I'm not stopping until I understand what's happening here," Tyler declared. "Come on, let's see what you've really got." The other students exchanged worried glances. The atmosphere in the gym had shifted dramatically from casual training to something much more serious. Several people began urging Tyler to reconsider, but he was too focused on Marcus to pay attention to their concerns. Marcus sighed softly and moved to face Tyler once more. This time, there was a subtle change in his posture. While he still appeared relaxed, there was something more alert about his positioning, as if he was finally taking the situation seriously. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Marcus asked. "Positive." Tyler launched into a combination of punches and kicks that showcased his technical training beautifully. His form was excellent. His timing was precise, and his power was impressive. Against most opponents, the assault would have been overwhelming. Marcus moved like water. Every strike Tyler threw was deflected, redirected, or simply avoided with minimal apparent effort. Marcus seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once, always just out of reach but never appearing to retreat. When Tyler threw a straight punch, Marcus wasn't there. When Tyler attempted a kick, Marcus had already moved to a different angle. Most disturbing for Tyler was that Marcus never seemed to be rushing or straining. His movements were economical and precise, as if he was conserving energy while Tyler exhausted himself with increasingly desperate attacks. After nearly a minute of continuous assault, Tyler began to slow down. His breathing became labored, and his techniques started to lose their crispness. Marcus, meanwhile, appeared to be barely breathing hard. "How is this possible?" Tyler panted, pausing his attack to try to understand what was happening. "Experience," Marcus replied simply. Tyler stared at him, sweat dripping from his forehead. "Experience? What kind of experience? You're a janitor!" For the first time since the encounter began, Marcus's expression shifted slightly. Something harder entered his eyes, and his voice carried a different quality when he spoke. I'm a lot of things, son. Janitor is just one of them. Before Tyler could respond, Marcus moved forward for the first time in their encounter. Up until this point, he had been purely defensive, simply responding to Tyler's attacks. Now he took the initiative. What followed was a demonstration of martial arts skill that went far beyond anything the students at Elite Fitness Academy had ever witnessed. Marcus moved with a precision and efficiency that made Tyler's excellent technique look clumsy by comparison. Every movement had a purpose, every position offered multiple options, and every technique flowed seamlessly into the next. Within seconds, Tyler found himself completely controlled. Marcus had him in a position where Tyler couldn't move, couldn't escape, and couldn't offer any resistance. It wasn't painful or violent. It was simply absolute control achieved through superior skill and knowledge. "Do you want me to stop?" Marcus asked quietly. Tyler tried to struggle but quickly realized the futility of his efforts. Marcus's control was complete and effortless. After a few seconds, Tyler stopped fighting and nodded. Marcus released him immediately and stepped back, resuming his earlier relaxed posture. Tyler remained on the mat for several seconds, his mind reeling from the experience. The watching students stood in complete silence. What they had witnessed challenged everything they thought they knew about martial arts, about skill levels, and about making judgments based on appearances. Jake Morrison was the first to find his voice. Who are you?" Marcus looked at the group of young faces staring at him with a mixture of awe and confusion. He could see their worldview crumbling, just as Tyler's had moments before. These young people had been taught that martial arts skill was measured in belt rankings, tournament victories, and expensive training. They had never considered that real expertise might come from different sources entirely. "My name is Marcus Thompson," he said simply. "I clean this gym, and I take care of my family. That's who I am." "But how do you know how to fight like that?" Jake pressed. "Where did you learn those techniques?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering how much to reveal. His natural inclination was to deflect questions about his past and maintain his privacy. However, looking at these young people, he realized that they needed to understand something important about the nature of skill, respect, and assumptions. "I spent 25 years in the United States Army," Marcus finally said. "Some of that time was with Special Forces units. Combat training was a significant part of my responsibilities." The silence that followed this revelation was profound. Tyler, still sitting on the mat, looked up at Marcus with an expression of dawning comprehension and embarrassment. "You're a veteran," Tyler said quietly. "Yes." "Special Forces." "Yes." Tyler closed his eyes and shook his head slowly. "I had no idea. I assumed." "I know what you assumed," Marcus replied gently. "And I understand why you made those assumptions. Most people do." Tyler struggled to his feet, his earlier arrogance completely deflated. "I owe you an apology. What I said earlier, the way I treated you, it was inexcusable." Marcus nodded acknowledgement but didn't respond immediately. He could see that Tyler was genuinely shaken by the encounter. Not just by the physical demonstration, but by the realization of how badly he had misjudged someone based on superficial appearances. "The thing is," Marcus continued, "this wasn't really about fighting or martial arts. This was about respect, and about the assumptions we make about people based on their job, their appearance, or their circumstances." He looked around at the group of students, making eye contact with each of them. "Every person you meet has a story, experiences you know nothing about, and skills you might never suspect. The moment you assume someone is beneath you or has nothing to offer, you stop learning and you stop growing." Tyler nodded slowly, the full weight of his earlier behavior settling on him. "You're absolutely right. I was completely out of line, and I learned something important tonight." "Good," Marcus said. "That makes this worthwhile then." As the immediate tension began to ease, several students started asking questions about Marcus's military service and combat experience. However, Marcus gently deflected most of their inquiries, making it clear that he preferred to keep his past private. What had started as Tyler's attempt to demonstrate his superiority had transformed into something much more significant. The young martial artists had learned lessons about humility, respect, and the danger of making assumptions that would stay with them far longer than any technical training they might receive. But the evening wasn't over yet. Word of what had happened was already beginning to spread throughout the gym, and the consequences of Tyler's challenge were just beginning to unfold. Or the ripple effect. Within minutes of the encounter ending, the story began spreading throughout Elite Fitness Academy like wildfire. Students who had witnessed the exchange shared details with friends, instructors, and anyone else who would listen. The tale grew more dramatic with each retelling, but the core message remained consistent. The quiet janitor had completely outclassed one of the gym's most accomplished fighters. Master Chen Wei, the head instructor and owner of Elite Fitness Academy, heard about the incident while finishing paperwork in his office. At 63 years old, Chen had seen countless martial arts demonstrations and sparring matches throughout his long career. However, the description of what had transpired between Tyler and Marcus caught his attention immediately. Chen had always prided himself on being able to recognize true martial arts skill, regardless of its source or style. He had noticed Marcus over the years, observing something in the man's movement and bearing that suggested more than met the eye. However, he had never found an appropriate way to approach Marcus about his suspicions. When Jake Morrison knocked on his office door 20 minutes after the encounter, Chen already knew why he had come. "Master Chen, you need to know what just happened," Jake began, still visibly shaken by what he had witnessed. "I've heard several versions already," Chen replied calmly. "Tell me what you saw." Jake recounted the evening's events in detail, from Tyler's initial comments about Marcus through the final demonstration of skill. As he spoke, Chen nodded thoughtfully, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. "And you're certain about what you witnessed?" Chen asked when Jake finished. "Absolutely. Tyler couldn't touch him. It was like watching someone play with a child, but the strangest part was how gentle he was about it. He could have hurt Tyler badly if he wanted to, but he never did anything malicious." Chen stood and walked to his office window, which overlooked the main training floor. Marcus was back to cleaning, methodically working his way through the gym as if nothing unusual had happened. Tyler sat on a bench nearby, still processing the experience. "Where is Marcus now?" Chen asked. "He went back to work, like nothing happened." Some of the other students tried to ask him questions, but he just smiled and said he needed to finish his duties. Chen watched Marcus for several minutes, noting the quiet dignity in his movements and the way he interacted respectfully with everyone around him, despite what had just occurred. "I want to speak with him," Chen decided. "Would you ask him to come to my office when he has a moment?" Jake nodded and left to deliver the message. Chen remained at his window, thinking about the implications of what had happened. Elite Fitness Academy had always prided itself on being a place where skill and character mattered more than social status or wealth. However, Tyler's behavior suggested that some students had lost sight of those values. 10 minutes later, Marcus knocked on Chen's office door. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Mai." "Chen?" Marcus asked politely. "Please come in, and call me Chen. We're both adults here." Marcus entered and stood respectfully near the door. Chen gestured to a chair, but Marcus remained standing. "I heard about what happened tonight," Chen began. "I wanted to make sure you were all right and to apologize for Tyler's behavior." "There's no need to apologize," Marcus replied. "Tyler's a good young man. He just needed to learn something tonight." Chen studied Marcus's face carefully. "That's very gracious of you. But I have to ask, where did you learn to move like that?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his response. I've had some training over the years. Military training? Among other things, yes. Chen nodded. I thought so. I've been watching you for 3 years, Marcus. There's something about the way you carry yourself, the way you move. I suspected you had significant martial arts background, but I never wanted to pry. I appreciate that, Marcus said. My past isn't something I talk about much. I'm here to work and provide for my family. That's what matters to me now. I understand, but after tonight, I think we need to have a different conversation. Chen walked back to his desk and sat down, gesturing again for Marcus to take a seat. This time, Marcus accepted the invitation. Tyler's behavior tonight was unacceptable, Chen continued. More importantly, it revealed a problem I've been concerned about for some time. Some of our students have begun to believe that martial arts skill makes them superior to other people. They've forgotten that true martial arts is about humility, respect, and personal development. Marcus nodded. Tyler's not a bad person. He's just young and successful. Sometimes that combination leads to poor judgment. You're very understanding, but the fact remains that he challenged and disrespected you based on assumptions about your background and capabilities. That goes against everything I try to teach here. Chen leaned forward in his chair. I have a proposition for you, Marcus. I'd like you to consider teaching here. Marcus looked genuinely surprised. Teaching? Chen, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not a martial arts instructor. I clean floors and empty trash cans. You're much more than that, and tonight proved it. You demonstrated skill and character that most of my black belts would envy. More importantly, you handled Tyler's challenge with exactly the kind of wisdom and restraint that I want my students to learn. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing the unexpected offer. What kind of teaching are you talking about? Practical self-defense, situational awareness, and most importantly, the mental and philosophical aspects of martial arts. You've clearly had real-world experience that goes far beyond what we can teach in a controlled gym environment. I don't have any teaching credentials or formal certifications in martial arts, Marcus pointed out. Chen smiled. Some of the most valuable lessons can't be certified or ranked. What you demonstrated tonight, skill, restraint, humility, and respect for your opponent even when he didn't deserve it. Those are the qualities I most want to develop in my students. Marcus considered the proposal carefully. What about my current job? I need the steady income. You'd keep your current position if you wanted it, at least initially. Teaching would be additional and well compensated. If it worked out well for everyone, we could discuss other arrangements. The conversation was interrupted by another knock on the door. Jake Morrison appeared again, looking somewhat embarrassed. Sorry to interrupt, Master Chen, but Tyler asked me to find out if Marcus was willing to speak with him. He says he has something important to say. Chen looked at Marcus questioningly. Marcus nodded. Send him in, Chen said. Tyler entered the office, looking thoroughly humbled. His earlier confidence had been completely replaced by genuine remorse and respect. Marcus, I wanted to apologize properly, Tyler began. Not just for challenging you, but for everything I said before that. I made assumptions about you that were completely wrong and disrespectful. Apology accepted, Marcus replied simply. No, that's not enough, Tyler continued. I need you to understand something. I've been training in martial arts for 15 years. I've competed nationally, won tournaments, earned multiple black belts. Tonight you made me look like a complete beginner. But more than that, you showed me what real skill and character look like. Tyler paused, struggling to find the right words. I've been thinking about what you said, about assumptions and respect. You're right. I've been so focused on my rankings and achievements that I forgot what martial arts is supposed to teach us about being a better person. Marcus stood and extended his hand to Tyler. You learned something important tonight. That makes you a better martial artist than you were this morning. Tyler shook Marcus's hand gratefully. Would you be willing to teach me? I mean, really teach me. Not just techniques, but the other stuff. The wisdom part. Chen and Marcus exchanged glances. Chen spoke first. Interesting timing, Tyler. I was just asking Marcus to consider teaching here. Tyler's face lit up with hope and excitement. Really? That would be incredible. Marcus looked back and forth between Tyler and Chen, seeing the genuine enthusiasm in their faces. He thought about his daughter in college, his elderly mother, and the financial pressures that kept him working double shifts just to make ends meet. But more than that, he thought about the opportunity to make a positive difference in young people's lives. "I'll consider it," Marcus said finally. "But if I do this, we do it my way. No ego, no showing off, no disrespecting people based on their appearance or circumstances. Everyone starts equal and everyone earns their progress through character as much as skill." "Absolutely," Chen agreed immediately. Tyler nodded emphatically. Over the following weeks, word of Marcus's background and abilities spread throughout the martial arts community. Students from other gyms began visiting Elite Fitness Academy, hoping to train with the legendary Janitor who had humbled one of the region's most accomplished fighters. Marcus initially resisted the attention, preferring to maintain his privacy and continue his regular work. However, Chen gradually convinced him to begin teaching small classes focused on practical self-defense and the mental aspects of martial arts training. Marcus's teaching style was unlike anything the students had experienced before. Instead of focusing on complex techniques or flashy demonstrations, he emphasized situational awareness, conflict avoidance, and the psychological aspects of confrontation. His lessons drew from real-world experience rather than sport fighting, and his students quickly developed a deeper understanding of what martial arts could truly accomplish. Tyler became one of Marcus's most dedicated students, approaching his new training with the humility he had learned during their first encounter. The experience had fundamentally changed his perspective on martial arts and life in general. He began volunteering with local youth programs, sharing what he had learned about respect and character development. The transformation wasn't limited to Tyler. Other students began approaching their training differently, focusing less on ranking and competition and more on personal development. The atmosphere at Elite Fitness Academy shifted toward the values Chen had always wanted to promote. Marcus discovered that he genuinely enjoyed teaching, particularly when he could help young people develop not just physical skills, but also wisdom and character. The additional income allowed him to reduce his cleaning shifts and spend more time with his family, improving his quality of life significantly. 6 months after that first encounter, Elite Fitness Academy hosted a special seminar featuring Marcus as the main instructor. Students and instructors from gyms throughout the region attended, eager to learn from someone whose skills had become legendary in local martial arts circles. During the seminar, Marcus shared stories from his military service and discussed the differences between sport fighting and real-world conflict. However, he spent most of his time talking about respect, humility, and the responsibility that comes with martial arts knowledge. True strength, Marcus told the assembled crowd, isn't about dominating other people or proving your superiority. It's about having the power to hurt someone and choosing not to. It's about using your skills to protect others and build them up, not to tear them down. Tyler introduced Marcus at the seminar, sharing the story of their first encounter and how it had changed his life. The audience listened with rapt attention as Tyler described his initial arrogance and the valuable lessons he had learned about making assumptions. "Marcus taught me that everyone has something to offer, something to teach us, if we're humble enough to listen," Tyler concluded. "The most important technique he showed me wasn't a fighting move. It was how to treat people with respect and dignity, regardless of their job or social status." After the seminar, many attendees approached Marcus with job offers and opportunities to teach at other facilities. However, Marcus chose to remain at Elite Fitness Academy, where he could continue working with Chen and the students who had become like family to him. The story of the janitor who humbled the black belt became a local legend, retold countless times in gyms and martial arts schools throughout the region. However, for those who knew Marcus personally, the real story wasn't about fighting techniques or demonstrations of skill. The real story was about the power of respect, the danger of assumptions, and the way one man's character and dignity could transform an entire community. Marcus had shown everyone at Elite Fitness Academy that true strength came not from the ability to dominate others, but from the wisdom to lift them up. Years later, when Tyler achieved his instructor certification and began teaching his own classes, he always started with the same lesson. Never assume you know someone's story based on what you see on the surface. Everyone you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about, and everyone has something to teach you if you're humble enough to learn. The encounter between Marcus and Tyler had lasted only a few minutes, but its impact continued to influence lives and attitudes long after that night. Elite Fitness Academy became known throughout the region not just for producing skilled martial artists, but for developing people of character who understood that true martial arts was about much more than fighting. Marcus continued working as both janitor and instructor, finding fulfillment in both roles. He had proven that respect and dignity weren't determined by job titles or social status, but by how we treat one another and what we choose to do with the opportunities we're given. The young man who had challenged a janitor to a friendly fight had learned the most important lesson of his martial arts career: that the most powerful techniques were kindness, humility, and respect for every person we encounter. And the janitor who had accepted that challenge had shown an entire community what true strength really looked like.